And welcome back. My next guest is an Army veteran and a comedian who served 3 years for peacefully protesting on January 6th. I want to play a little bit of an audio tape that was recorded by his roommate. His friend was coerced into recording this in order to indict this young man. In the recording, he says that he believes that the violence on January 6th was entirely a setup, that Biden is being installed as president. And then this happens. Listen to this.
It gets more illegitimate with each day, and I don't think anything's going to happen on the 20th, frankly, but I think it's fucking telling that they need 20,000 National Guard troops. They need fucking fencing and barbed wire to keep who out. Who, like, you know?
I mean, do you plan on doing that shit again?
No. I think they're setting us up for us. I'm not going to fucking fight 20,000 fucking National Guard troops. Even if I
Well, I'm not talking about, like, in the inauguration, but, like, would you be a part of something like that again?
Are you wearing a wire?
Yes, Tim, I'm wearing a fucking wire.
Are you wearing a wire?
Yeah, well, it turned out he was wearing a wire. My guest is Tim Hale, joining me now. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me on. It's you're such a Herculean figure. It's such an honor to be on this legendary journey with you. Thank you so much. And yeah, he was wearing
Okay,
a wire.
I did warn everybody. He is a comedian. Try the veal. Listen, Tim, what's amazing about you served for 3 years, much of it in solitary confinement. It took a toll. I'm not saying that it didn't take a toll on you, but you are resilient. But let's talk about this. This is your roommate. He literally was wearing a wire in order to entrap you. I don't know what the proper legal term is, but in order to trap you into saying something. And you said nothing, and they still locked you up. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And in fact, on the this can be convoluted. I'll just shorten it. The one felony they tried to accuse me of required something called mens rea, a criminal intent or criminal mind. And I actually said in the recording, I had no plan to do anything at the Capitol. And so they had this on the recording and they still chose to prosecute me anyway. So, yeah, I mean, I wasn't trapped and I was also falsely incriminated. And, word to the wise, never drink when someone next to you is wearing a wire. You might say something stupid.
Yeah, but you said nothing stupid. That's what's crazy about it. And the point is that they chose to not believe the candid you, who didn't know he was being recorded, and they just chose to basically believe the worst about you that they could drum up, and they locked you up. Now, you served exactly how long?
I served 3 years on a 4-year sentence. So fortunately, President Trump, he signed the First Step Act, so I was able to accrue good time credits, essentially, for not being an F-up when I was locked up. But I had to keep in mind, the Supreme Court just threw out the one felony I was convicted of. So that means that at max, I should have done a year for misdemeanors. So I did 3 times the incarceration and I logically should have done or legally should have done for anything I might have done, which would have been misdemeanors, if anything.
And this is after serving honorably in our armed services.
Yep, I served 12 years in the United States military. I actually served 2 branches of the DoD. I was an Army administrator, and then I also worked as a contractor for the Navy, as a weapons contractor. So I had a secret security clearance in the military and the DoD. They never seemed to think I was this domestic terrorist until I went to protest in a suit and tie just like this, well, with a tie. As soon as I go to protest on behalf of President Trump and against a rigged election, suddenly I'm a threat to the United States of America. They never thought that beforehand.
Can you describe a little bit of what that was like on January 6th, like where you were, what happened, and how you got involved and therefore then incriminated?
So those who went to actually listen to President Trump's speech, and funny enough, not everybody did who was at the Capitol. Some people went to the Capitol before he even started speaking. I went to listen to Trump speak at what's called the Ellipse, an area sort of near where the Washington Monument is. And before Trump's speech was even over, people were knocking barriers over around the Capitol perimeter. So this happens a half hour before someone like me shows up. So I walk into a trap. I don't know there's a restricted area. So I just walk into an area, and I have plenty of video from my phone proving we were just singing God Bless America. We were chanting Christ is King. We were chanting USA. We were on the Capitol grounds. We were totally peaceful. So there was no inclination, or there was no indication to us that there was anything going on that was wrong. And then the cops, not knowing how to do their jobs, I guess, start throwing flashbangs into the middle of the crowd, and that incites the riot. So there were agitators in the crowd trying to hype people up, but for the most part, people didn't know there was anything wrong going on. And so the Capitol Police, and especially the Metro PD, incited the riot by spraying people, attacking old ladies, body slamming people, and doing all kinds of stuff you're not going to see on CNN. But I got the video. Some of us have the video. The problem is getting the public to see this, because there's been this narrative that's just been going on for 3 years, and it's totally BS.
Thank you for cleaning it up for my show, Tim. Listen, so you said that people went to the Capitol in advance. In other words, they were not Trump supporters. They were there to be at the Capitol in advance of the Trump supporters, and they took down barriers on purpose so that the Trump supporters would then be crossing unseen barriers and be basically in a trespass zone without knowing that they were trespassing. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Correct. There was like a piecemeal perimeter set up. You partially using bike racks, which just got knocked over, and then there were these fences that basically just got like almost like chicken wire with little restricted area signs. These got torn down real quick, folded up, and thrown away to the side. So thousands of people pour into the area, not knowing they're not allowed to be there. And yes, I can't know the motivations of every single person who was there earlier, but we do know there were Antifa members in the crowd. There were also confidential human sources, or CHSs, basically snitches working for the feds, probably to get out of trouble for stuff they were caught in. And there were FBI agents and other federal agents and assets that were in the crowd in plain clothing. We know this for a fact. We have a lot of their names. So this isn't a conspiracy theory. The problem is, of course, your average person just doesn't know this. And so it really begs the question, was this entrapment? If thousands of people pour into an area committing the crime of trespassing or whatever, and they don't even know they're trespassing, meanwhile, the scheme originated within officers or within, confidential human sources, like FBI informants like James Knowles, who infiltrated the Proud Boys. We have some of their names. So the question is, why isn't there more outrage about this? And why don't we have all their names?
What was serving in prison like?
It was surreal because honestly, I would say prison was it was very different than jail. Jail was different because it was a different environment. A lot of it is just wasting time. When you were in solitary, it was almost like Groundhog's Day. It's just on loop, repeat. Time is almost fluid. But it was surreal because when you're locked up, it's hard to explain this to people, but like morality is entirely inverted. So the person who screwed their life up the most is considered the wisest person. It's very weird. But in the DC gulag, in the jail where they held us without bond, without bail, until we went to prison, a third of the people in there with us were plants, federal informants, Antifa, snitches, and stuff like that. And their whole time there was just basically just to sabotage our cases. And so you had people planted in there, J6 patriots. Meanwhile, they're trying to ruin our ability to defend ourselves. They're sending information into the prosecutors and the courts. So it was a psyop within a psyop. I always used to say that the DC jail was a mix between a mental asylum and an FBI field office, because they kept us in a nut house. Basically, it wasn't even the main jail. They segregated us in what they called the CTF, the Central Treatment Facility, and totally controlled environment. Like I said, there were plants in there with us. The first year or so, they kept us in solitary just to break us and force us into plea deals. They wouldn't let us take communion. We couldn't have religious services. They held people hostage to the COVID shot. So if you wanted religious services, if you wanted to see your lawyer, if you wanted to see family, they would just tell you, well, if you get the COVID shot, we'll let you do that. And then if someone did, most people didn't, but if they did, then they still couldn't do it. They lied to them. They held you completely hostage. They tried to steal your evidence. God forbid you actually got to see some of the evidence in your case. They would try to steal it. The guards would come in and they would just try to shake your room down and take your stuff. It was a complete violation of due process. Everything we held sacred as Americans, equal protection under the law, the Bill of Rights, everything that we value in this country, the rights of the accused, totally flushed down the toilet, totally down the drain. And I'm sorry to say, but because of the narrative that people just bought into after J6, nobody cared. Nobody cared. There were a couple of people like Julie Kelly that came out, pretty early on, but for the most part, even the conservative outlets, they didn't care. They thought, like Ben Shapiro, like they thought we were getting what we deserved. They wanted us to burn and rot in hell, and that's what they wanted. They didn't care. And meanwhile, the real lesson here is that this created a horrible precedent because we have a common law system. So anything they did to us a couple years ago, they can do to you now. And they can do to anybody. If they get another term, for instance, if Kamala gets in there, they could just do this all over again. It's a horrible precedent to set. We have a great legal system because of how it's framed, but it's fragile because if you abuse it once, that can carry on into the future. So, sorry, I read a little too much case. I read too much case law when I was locked up. I was a jailhouse lawyer, so.
Hey, look, I don't blame you. What I find fascinating is that they incarcerated people who were there in order to inform on you, and they tried to break you before they allowed you to sort of fraternize with them, and then they were there to take whatever you said and use it against you. It's really there's a plan behind this whole thing that's so insidious that speaks of a greater plan that it really should put us all on edge. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, this is becoming a very common thing now in America. Before J6, you had the Michigan kidnapping plot out of Michigan for the governor there, with the Wolverine Watchmen. That was an entrapment scheme. You see feds now, like this group, Patriot Front, and all this. You had people in the jail with me trying to get me to set up a new Oklahoma City bombing. I'm not exaggerating.
What can people do? What can people do now? Like, I got 30 seconds left on the show. So where do you want to send people?
You can follow me on X. Just look up Tim Hale, criminally funny, J6er. We're trying to sell this painting. It's by a woman named Sarah Radonovich. We're trying to sell this for charity. So if anybody wants to do that,
it's auctioning, yeah.
Yeah, it's being auctioned at patriotbidproject.com.
Yeah. Okay. And that's up on the screen also. I want to thank you so much for speaking out. We need you to speak louder. And as I tell everybody, speak truth, speak it boldly. This is the Sam Sorbo Show. Thanks for watching.
Sam Sorbo.